For 2,000 years, we have imagined the Library of Alexandria dying in a single night of fire. A conqueror orders ships burned. Flames cross the harbor. Thousands of irreplaceable scrolls vanish before dawn. It is one of history's most powerful images, and perhaps one of its most misleading. Because the Great Library may never have been destroyed in one decisive catastrophe. It may have survived Caesar, survived fire, and then disappeared through centuries of war, neglect, and fear. Tonight, we reopen the greatest cold case in the history of human knowledge. Alexandria began not as an ancient settlement, but as the vision of a young Macedonian conqueror. Alexander chose this narrow strip of coast to link Egypt with the wider Mediterranean world. Within generations, those lines in the sand became one of the richest cities on Earth. Ships arrived from Greece, Phoenicia, Asia Minor, North Africa, and lands even farther away. Goods crossed its docks, but so did languages, beliefs, maps, discoveries, and stories.
هذه الرموز غريبة. انظر إلى هذا الخط الساحلي. Ναι, και αυτοί οι χαρακτήρες είναι φοινικικοί. נכון, הם מסמנים נתיבי מסחר חדשים.
Alexandria was designed to control trade. Its rulers would soon attempt something even more ambitious, controlling knowledge. Under the Ptolemaic kings, the royal court pursued a dream no empire had achieved, a collection of every important text. Royal agents purchased manuscripts abroad, borrowed private collections, and commissioned copies from distant cities. Studying the original now. This line matches? Yes, transcribe it.
This must be tagged for copying, but it is my property. It will be returned. See that it is. To the scribes.
Whether every version of that story is true or not, its meaning is unmistakable. Alexandria did not merely preserve knowledge, it gathered, classified, compared, and transformed it. This was not simply a warehouse of scrolls, it was an organized engine for producing new ideas. The library belonged to a larger institution called the Mouseion, a sanctuary dedicated to the Muses. Here, scholars received rooms, meals, working spaces, and something even more precious, time.
Φιλοσοφίαν διελέγοντο, και ποίηματα κατεσκεύαζον. Είδε, εντάφθα λείπει. Κοινό την άλλην. Ναι, εντάουθα ίσως. Συμφωνεί.
In these rooms, mathematics became a disciplined system of definitions, proofs, and logical steps. Geography expanded beyond travelers' tales into measurements of distance, latitude, and the shape of the Earth.
The herbs align with the map's fertile lands, the gear's teeth match the meridian's curve, and the verse sings of celestial order. The tablet's stars confirm the paths.
The names connected with Alexandria read like a map of ancient intellectual achievement. Euclid's mathematical tradition shaped the way generations would understand geometry and proof.
Behold, the proof is complete.
Incredible, the proof matches the map.
Eratosthenes compared shadows in different cities and estimated the size of the Earth with astonishing insight. Long before satellites, the planet's circumference could be approached through observation, geometry, and reason. Alexandrian musicians also studied the human body more directly than many cultures had allowed. Observe how the forearm bones pivot. Compare this to the drawing. The rotation matches the diagram. Astronomers catalogued the heavens, while poets and critics attempted to preserve the finest words of the past. Later tradition would claim that the library contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls. The exact number is uncertain. Ancient estimates conflict, and one scroll did not necessarily equal one complete work. A collection described as 400,000 scrolls might represent far fewer distinct books, or perhaps many more fragments. But the uncertainty does not make the institution insignificant. It reveals how little of its own record has survived. We know the library primarily through fragments, later accounts and echoes of scholars who once worked around it. And before we ask who destroyed Alexandria's library, we must confront a more difficult question. What exactly was lost? What was lost cannot be reconstructed as a simple list, because no complete catalogue of the great library survives. Its shelves probably held celebrated literature, scientific treatises, legal records, histories, religious texts, and works now known only by title. Entire cycles of Greek drama once existed beyond the small selection that has reached the modern world. We possess only a fraction of the plays attributed to Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Other texts may have described coastlines, kingdoms, and journeys recorded before later maps erased or distorted them. This traveler's note matches the coast. The chord confirms it, the route extends beyond the edge. But the blank space beyond that edge tempts us to imagine more than the evidence can support. The library is often credited with lost inventions, advanced machines, and discoveries centuries ahead of their time. Some claims are plausible. Others arise because an empty archive can become a screen for every dream we project upon it. No surviving source proves that Alexandria possessed steam engines, electric devices, or a complete map of the globe. Yet uncertainty cuts both ways. We cannot prove that such works existed, but neither can we catalogue everything that disappeared. Most ancient writing vanished without spectacular flames. Papyrus decayed, copies stopped, and languages lost their readers. A text survived only when someone considered it valuable enough to copy again. The library's greatest protection was royal patronage. That protection was also its deepest vulnerability. Cyrils prospered when kings valued prestige, research, and intellectual competition. They suffered when dynastic survival mattered more than books, instruments, or salaries. By the 2nd century BCE, the Ptolemaic dynasty had become consumed by rival claimants, court violence, and civil conflict. This is the true succession! We will not yield! In 145 BCE, Ptolemy VIII emerged from one such struggle, determined to punish those who had opposed him. By royal decree, intellectuals, teachers, and skilled professionals are expelled from Alexandria. Later tradition records that intellectuals, teachers, and skilled professionals were driven from Alexandria. Among those forced away was Aristarchus of Samothrace, one of the most respected textual scholars of his age. The shelves remained, but an institution is more than its building and collection. Knowledge lived in the people who interpreted, corrected, challenged, and transmitted what the scrolls contained. As scholars scattered, Alexandrian methods traveled with them to other cities and courts. The exile weakened Alexandria, but it also spread fragments of its intellectual culture across the Mediterranean. The first major wound was therefore not a fire. It was the loss of stability, trust, and human expertise. Nearly a century later, another dynastic crisis drew the most powerful men in the Roman world toward Alexandria. Egypt was divided between Cleopatra VII and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. Match the divided map to Egypt's divided military forces. Their rivalry had become a civil war fought with armies, propaganda, palace intrigue, and foreign alliances. At the same moment, Rome's own civil war sent the defeated general Pompey fleeing across the sea. Pompey expected protection from a dynasty his influence had once helped preserve. Instead, the Egyptian court chose to offer Caesar a brutal demonstration of loyalty. When Julius Caesar arrived days later, Pompey was already dead. The murder did not solve Egypt's crisis. It placed Caesar directly inside it.
Caesar, the numbers are dire, heavily outnumbered.
With only a limited force, Caesar occupied the royal quarter and demanded that Cleopatra and Ptolemy settle their dispute before him. Present your claims. Cleopatra understood that Rome's judgment could restore her throne or end her claim forever.
Surround the palace! Turn Alexandria against the Roman intruders! For Ptolemy! For Egypt! Advance! Block the harbor road!
Trapped between the palace and the sea, Caesar made the decision that would bind his name to the library forever.
Burn the ships! Burn the library!
Caesar's immediate problem was military, not intellectual. Enemy ships threatened to cut off his position from the sea. Burning the vessels would deny them to the enemy and open space for Roman survival. It was a calculated act of war, but fire obeys wind, wood, and chance, not strategy.
Smoke! From the roof! The manuscripts! Protect the crates! Quickly before it spreads!
Later writers would connect Caesar's fire with the destruction of thousands of scrolls. Yet the earliest surviving testimony does not describe the complete destruction of the Great Library itself.
In Alexandria, our ships faced great danger. The combat was fierce on the water. Our victory secured the harbor.
Silence is not proof. Authors omit events for many reasons, especially events that damage their reputation. But if the greatest archive in the Mediterranean had vanished completely, Caesar's silence would be remarkable. The first clear stories of destroyed books appear in authors writing after the event, not in Caesar's own account.
The testimonies are clear, yet conflicting.
Note this down. Yes, Master. One tradition described 40,000 scrolls burned. Another placed books near the docks rather than inside the main library. That distinction matters because a burned shipment of books is not the same as the destruction of the institution that collected them. While armies fought for streets and palaces, people inside Alexandria tried to save whatever they could carry. The survival of any individual manuscript depended on decisions made in seconds. A road closed, a roof collapsed, a frightened carrier chose one doorway instead of another. History is often shaped not only by kings and generals, but by unnamed people whose choices left no record.
Here, let me help you.
For a moment, the manuscript that connects our story lies unguarded between rescue and ruin. Then another pair of hands enters the chain of survival. Follow him into the scholarly quarter. The strongest challenge to the single-night destruction story comes from what happened afterward.
I have the scrolls! From the fires! Quickly, bring them inside. The archive must be preserved.
Sources from later decades suggest that the Mouseion, or at least a scholarly institution carrying its identity, continued to exist. Decades after Caesar, the geographer Strabo described the Mouseion as part of Alexandria's royal quarter.
Behold the Mouseion.
He referred to shared dining, covered walks, and a community of learned men.
Strabo, join us. This manuscript concerns the very walks you described.
His account does not prove that every collection survived unchanged. It does suggest that Caesar's fire did not erase the entire institution in one final blow. So how did a complex sequence of fires, losses, and survival become one unforgettable image? Because stories prefer a villain, a knight, and a visible catastrophe. And so, the library burned, with Caesar watching. Gradual decline has no single face. Neglect has no dramatic final frame. Follow the drop onto Piper's fibers. A manuscript can disappear quietly when one generation fails to copy what the previous generation preserved. Once the final copy was gone, no fire was needed. The legend of one enormous blaze may therefore conceal a more disturbing truth. Perhaps Alexandria's knowledge was not murdered by one man. It may have been weakened by kings, damaged by war, starved by politics, and slowly abandoned by changing priorities. The first suspect was not fire, it was dependence. When rulers changed, the institution's protection changed with them. When scholars left, knowledge lost its interpreters. When budgets vanished, copying slowed. When violence returned, collections scattered. Caesar's fire was real, but the deeper investigation now points beyond the harbor to the centuries that followed. The centuries after Caesar did not bring one ending. They brought repeated attempts to continue with less. Alexandria remained a center of trade and learning, but the royal system that had created the Mouseion was gone.
Here the phrasing is clearer. This copy must be preserved. From the patron to support your work, our gratitude, we will continue.
What had once been a state-supported machine of knowledge became a scattered network of schools, collections, and individual teachers. Knowledge had not vanished, but it was becoming more vulnerable to every interruption. In the 3rd century, that interruption arrived as invasion, rebellion, and imperial war. By the early 270s, Alexandria had become a battlefield in Rome's struggle against the breakaway Palmyrene Empire. Emperor Aurelian's forces fought to recover the city, driving combat into districts once occupied by royal palaces and scholars.
Soldiers advance! Drive them back! For Rome, advance!
Ancient evidence does not provide a clear inventory of what still existed there. But the fighting devastated the Mouseion, the royal quarter in which the original Mouseion had once stood. If a recognizable remnant of the original library survived Caesar, this may have been the blow it could not endure. Yet even here, the verdict must remain cautious. Probable destruction is not the same as documented certainty. Another institution stood far from the ruined royal quarter, on the elevated ground of the Serapeum. Ancient writers remembered a collection there as a daughter of the greater library.
It will be safe here.
But historians cannot establish how large that collection remained or whether it still functioned as a major library by the 4th century. By 391, Alexandria's religious landscape had become a contest over authority, sacred space, and public identity.
The pagans cling to their idols, but we shall prevail.
Imperial laws against pagan worship gave Bishop Theophilus the power to confront Alexandria's remaining temples.
The decree is clear. We move on the Serapeum. The legions will be ready.
Conflict followed, and pagan defenders withdrew into the Serapeum as violence spread through the city. When the confrontation ended, the temple complex was broken, its cult images destroyed, and its sacred meaning deliberately overturned. Whether a substantial library was destroyed with it remains uncertain. The destruction of a temple is documented. The destruction of the original Great Library at that moment is not. Alexandria's intellectual life continued outside the fallen temple.
What is it, Master?
The key to our understanding. Pagan, Christian, and Jewish scholars did not stop thinking when one building changed hands.
Observe the relationship in this angle. Yes, but a correction here aligns it to Hypatia's proof.
Within a generation, the most famous teacher in Alexandria would be a philosopher and mathematician named Hypatia.
Observe how this line completes the proof, revealing the logical relationship.
Hypatia did not direct the ancient Great Library, which had almost certainly disappeared long before her lifetime.
Hypatia, is that the Serapeum? Yes, its ruins stand apart from our school.
Your wisdom is needed.
Prefect, my calculations on the celestial alignments.
Fascinating, Hypatia. How does this affect the calendar?
It suggests a need for reform.
She challenges the faith. We cannot allow it.
In 415, she became trapped inside a bitter conflict between the imperial prefect Orestes and Bishop Cyril.
The prefect's district, Your Grace. This cannot stand.
Hypatia is blocking the peace. She's turning the people against us. A political target now?
Rumors accused Tosh of preventing reconciliation, transforming a respected teacher. A Christian mob seized and murdered her, an act of political violence that became a lasting symbol of intolerance. Yet even Hypatia's death was not the final extinction of learning in Alexandria.
Her theorems endure. Let us build upon them.
More than 2 centuries later, Arab armies captured Alexandria, and another destroyer entered the legend. A much later story claimed that Caliph Umar ordered the library's books burned to heat the city's baths. But the account appears roughly 500 years after the conquest, includes impossible chronology, and has no support from contemporary witnesses. The evidence points to no single executioner, only a long chain of rulers, wars, vanished funding, damaged buildings and texts no one copied again. Alexandria's greatest lesson is not that knowledge can burn. It is that knowledge disappears when societies stop protecting the people who preserve it. And beneath another ancient landscape, a discovery waits that may force us to rewrite where civilization began.